quickly, and then a couple of them get killed, but then, the core group survives. But then in the Lost World, you have these you have a whole group of bounty hunters and poachers, and then a whole group of scientists, and there's all these people, and they're dying left and right, and you don't care. And yeah, they up the monster level, right, of more dinosaurs, more sharks. But again, it was never about the sharks. It was never about the dinosaurs. It was about the people and how they react to them. So, hey, I love seeing Brody back. I mean, him being a haunted character from the first one. I think there's a lot of potential there. They touch on it. They touch on the fact that he's seeing sharks when it's just a school of fish and shooting a gun into the water and all these kinds of crazy things. But they never really go there with the whole PTSD we talked about in the last episode. They didn't really talk about PTSD in the 70s, but that's definitely something Brody's going through. And even I like the opening where they're on the orca. I'm oh, that's pretty cool. And they take a picture of the shark with the camera, but it takes them forever to get that camera back into the story. They should have that should have been the first clue that led to other things. Because I feel there's some good elements here. And the aftermath of the first film, and like Ken was saying, maybe that original script, that original book, might have played those up more. But I don't know. It just all that if the first Jaws was made with lesser hands, this is what we would have gotten, right? And that's the way it feels. And you have that A/B comparison for Jaws 1 and Jaws 2, and so that's why it makes it very interesting. But I will say, and then I'll pass it off to you guys. I appreciate the fact that the world is still there. All the characters are still there. Brody, his wife, the mayor, the townspeople, his goofy deputy, who's basically a Barney Fife kind of deputy. I mean, he's back even. And the world of Amity Island feels the same, so I give them credit there. But, there's no Hooper, but would Hooper really be back if this was the real world? Probably not. So it's I miss Richard Dreyfuss's interplay with Ray Schneider, but if this was the real world, would he come back for this? I don't think so. So it is kind of realistic, I guess, but there's just so much of that lightning in a bottle that you can't recapture, and that's what we're seeing here with Jaws 2.
That's fair.
Yeah, you said that you don't like the camera element took so long to get back. To me, that's an interesting, it's a misdirect. It's they get the camera and then they kind of forget about it. And we have the explosion of the boat in the meantime, right? And that's what I find fascinating about the movie is because the audience is so far ahead of the characters in this. We know that it's a shark attack, right? But nobody else knows that it's a shark attack at this time, right? Nobody else knows what's going on. And so, Brody's getting paranoid. And with the first movie having been no, this is a rarity that a shark is going to be this far north. When he brings the development of the film, we've had a couple of multiple deaths. Brody seems very paranoid. And so he's got that going against him. He ends up getting fired from his job because they're worried he's going to bring a panic again. In the end, he's right because that's the kind of movie that we're telling, right? But I don't know. I like that aspect that camera was even forgotten about. And then the evidence that it's brought is still not very good evidence. So I don't know. I think it's neat. So, Ken?
Yeah, we all have different. Think of it this way too, Brandon. I mean, very, very successful producers, Zanuck and Brown, who've made a lot of great movies. Saw what Hancock was doing, and they changed course for a reason. Okay, so these guys know what works from a Hollywood perspective. So there had to be something there that they weren't getting or they didn't think would click in order for them to make the movie that we had now and to hire, a relatively, this director was even less known than Spielberg was when he did Jaws, so they might have been trying to capture lightning in a bottle twice just from that perspective, But I think what fails in the movie, and for me in 1978, I would have been 11, maybe 12 years old because I was born late in the year. There were just so many things that I got mad at the movie, right? Little things that was just oh, come on. I mean, capturing the water skier, the major explosion. Okay. It was dramatic. Chasing down the sailboats, that all seemed weird. The helicopter way over the top. But what really got me was when they were rescuing Tina out of the sailboat, and Brody, who doesn't know a thing about boats, doesn't know how to navigate or whatever, leaves his wife and the deputy knows everything about boats, on that little sailboat, and he goes off to be the hero by himself. And I was well, that's unbelievable. When the police boat is a mile away, you see his son go, "That's Dad." And I'm going, what does he have, X-ray vision? And there's no way he could see. There was like all these little things in the movie that just kept tripping me up. And the thing was, as soon as they came upon Cable Junction, as an 11-year-old kid, I was like, they're going to electrocute the shark. And I remember saying that to my dad in the movies because we were watching. I said, "Oh, they're going to electrocute him." He's like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, they're going to electrocute him. And I remember we're leaving it. He's like, he's talking to my brother and another person we brought to the movie. He's like, "Kenny figured it out." It's like, yeah, it wasn't that hard. So there was just, it was like in Jaws where I was so scared of being scared. Jaws 2 was different. I was more afraid of being right, or trying to figure out why they had such tremendous plot holes. Things that just the responses to the crisis didn't make sense. Once that whale washed ashore with the obvious shark bites in it, you're like, all right, I understand the camera was a misdirect, but what the hell is big enough to kill a killer whale? Other than another killer whale. And, that type of stuff. It was like, okay, all this evidence is here. Now it's just these people being purposely ignorant.
Well, that's part of what the original story would have been. They would have had those mafia ties from the novel, the first novel. They were going to bring those back, right, into Jaws 2, and that would have maybe explained why they were like, all right, we got to keep the beaches open because, we need the money to pay these guys off. Like, that would have been an external factor that wouldn't feel so contrived about these people just putting their heads in the sand. Because when Brody's up there at the stand looking out at the ocean, they act like he's a crazy person. Like, I agree with his wife. She's like, well, he's just doing his job. Chief of police, looking up there on a perch, and they're acting like he's insane, which is, okay, shooting a gun into the water like that is insane. I agree. Yeah, but him just looking up there, they act like it's embarrassing the whole town. And that you needed some other external factor to not make people look like idiots. And when you're not engaged in the story the way you are in the first Jaws, like this one, I found myself checking my phone, being distracted because it just wasn't engaged. And when you're not engaged, you start seeing these plot holes because you're not caught up in the story. You're not in the drama and the fear with the characters. And these flaws become really evident. And that's another major problem in this film.
Okay, let me ask you a question about that, Zach. Do you think it's the chief of police's job to be whale watching and like watching up there? That's like just a lifeguard's duty. That would be like a beach employee's. I don't believe it's the chief of police's job to be up that tower.
Well, there's like 4 law enforcement people on the whole island, so I don't know.
It's not law enforcement's duty to be doing that, right? So he's up there because he's on a mission. Like, so I understand why he's up there, and I don't question as a viewer why he's up there, but they're right. He shouldn't be up there. That's not his job to be up there. There should be somebody employed by the town to be up there, right?
The bigger piece that you're both missing, and you would miss because you're not familiar with New England. There are no shark towers in New England. Never have been. Okay, so one, it's obvious that they filmed it in Florida, and if they're proclaiming there's no sharks and there's nothing to worry about, they wouldn't have built the tower in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Well,
right. So that was just like when the little kid says that's a shark tower.
Yeah.
Right. I know what it is. Yeah. So that's a shark tower. It's almost like, well, who in the town would have funded such a thing? Because it's such an obvious, oh my God, if they need a shark tower on this beach, it's obviously a risky place to swim. And New England, up until last year, hadn't had many shark attacks. It's just not a place for it. So for you guys, I get what you're saying, but for me, that was an automatic. There are none. I've been to every beach you can think of here in Massachusetts and in that area, and they might exist today because of the issues we have, but it was a non-existent thing that was just the only place you see them is Florida. And in fact, that's what the little kid said.
Yeah, the kids.
I've seen them in Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, I've seen them in Florida. It's like, oh, okay, well, why would you have it there? That was, again, another plot hole.
Because they just had a shark attack in the last movie.
Yeah, right? That was 3 years earlier.
Yeah.
And they're claiming the waters are safe. There's no shark. Why would you build a shark tower?
They would have built it as an immediate reaction to what happened the first time. Oh, we have a shark here. We better get a shark tower. And then they have a couple of summers and nobody's up there. Right? So, like, they had it for the first summer or two. Like, you go through the motions of being safe. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, you know what? This is probably never going to happen again. So they wouldn't have an employee. But again, it wouldn't be the chief of police's duty to be up there. right? So if this is a couple of years later, they would have built it immediately that summer, if not the following summer, to say, look, because people would be remembering that. The tourists would be remembering that there was a shark attack. Okay, well, we have a shark tower. We're watching for it now.
The rabbit holes
like,
we're going down to
completely
justify
believable.
this is hilarious to me. Sure.
Well, it's just funny, and your point is well made, Brandon.
Yes.
It's well made. It's just something that, like I said, it doesn't exist in New England. That's all.
I do want to
get
talk
it.
about the mayor character just for a minute.
This is why you vote people.
Yes, I've seen that meme where it's like, hey, the mayor in Jaws is still the mayor in Jaws 2. Exercise your right to vote, right? You know, and I think, it was ridiculous, like the city councilman and all of them, like, just sticking their heads in the sand about this. But at the same time, like, I didn't, again, they pushed it further this time, but at least with his character, I didn't feel like he was, like, evil. That's a great component. That you always have that the government component in all these kinds of movies, the ineptitude of government, especially local government. Like in the first one, I love when he's giving an interview. He's like, "Yes, there was apparently a boating accident that injured a couple of bathers, but you know everything's fine now." Like I love the spin that he puts on it and that kind of stuff. The continuity and kind of justifies a lot of things for me, so I get a lot of credit. That's why this one is more like a step above the next two, which are so far removed from the first movie. Like, you got the same town, the same kind of people, the same kind of stuff going on. It's like, when you have those familiar faces and characters, it kind of can take it a long way. Like, if this movie came out and had all these similar characters with different names, but they're all doing the exact same things, I think it would be held in even less regard, I think. Or do you think, oh, well, it's not connected to Jaws, so people will like it more? I don't know. Maybe it's a split. Maybe it's a 50-50. But I think because of those same, you know, you get Brody back, you get the mayor and his wife and his kids, that kind of elevates it because you want to see those characters continue. But at the same time, it's a sequel to Jaws. So it's a double-edged sword. It's a blessing and a curse that this is Jaws 2 is what I'm trying to say, I guess.
I don't think it would have worked had there been different people involved. And, you know, every time I watch this series of movies, I'm kind of surprised that all four of them center around this family. Because at some point you think that they would want to diverge from that because there's only so many times you can go back to that well. But yeah, I don't know that this would have worked better had it just been a completely different city.
Well, no,
village,
I'm
whatever.
saying, like, what if it's Jaws 2, it's a midi island, it's 5 years later, but the mayor's gone.
You are saying
Brody's
it wrong.
left.
You've been saying it wrong for a podcast and a half. It's Amity. It's not Amity, it's Amity.
Amity, all right, Amity Island. Okay, I'm just saying, like, if all those characters were gone, and we'd say, "Oh yeah, the shark thing that happened 5 years ago, and the Brodies they left town," like a Nightmare on Elm Street or a Friday the 13th, where they have 2 lines of dialogue about previous characters and events, and that's it. Or Pet Sematary, which we covered on this podcast before, and you don't see those characters at all. I think this would be held in a lot worse regard because at least you can kind of follow the adventures of Brody. You know,
yes. Okay.
least.
Yeah, I agree. I see what you're saying. Yes, I agree. Had they not been involved at all, it would be even lower. Yes.
And I agree with you. Jaws 3, right? Like, there was no reason to continue the Brody subplot of that. There was no reason. But anyway, we'll get to that next time.
I think that you know, everything you guys are saying makes sense. It's just a, you know, it's such an amusement ride, I guess. I can watch Jaws too, you know, I've watched it I don't know how many times, and I think it's because Brody's in it, to be honest with you, in the mayor and all of that. So it's kind of like, you know, whenever you see a sequel to something you really love, the fact that you get to spend some time with some old friends again makes it worth it. And I love the Brody character. And even though Roy Scheider and Jean did not get along, or Genet, I don't know how you pronounce his name. Jeannot didn't get along. He still acted his ass off.
Yeah, he did not phone it in.
He did not phone it in. The biggest problem they had was, and you'll see this in the movie a lot, is that Roy Scheider was into tanning. He loved the sun. And so in between takes and whatnot, he was getting darker and darker and darker. And so scenes that take a play, you know, that might be an hour apart in the film or 20 minutes apart, even though they're days apart in filming, he never looks the same. He gets so dark in this movie. But you can tell when they film things out of sequence, because sometimes he's darker in the earlier scenes and much lighter in the later scenes. And of course, this thing went into, I think, October, November filming. So again, it was another